Provisional Rem's Paranoia. Even Oni shed tears one. Katia-san, what was your relationship with your fiancé like? What? Katia couldn't hide her perplexed look towards Rem's words as she asked a question wrapped in innocence. Rem, who had chosen to push the wheelchair through a less bumpy road, was cursing her own lack of touch as she thought about how she had failed to make a segue that felt even a bit natural. But no matter how much she cursed at herself, what was done was done. No, like I said, I wondered what your relationship with your fiancé was like, so I heard you the first time. WHY now, all of a sudden, is what I mean. Was it weird? Of course it was. Take a look at the situation, hic. Katia became angry, with a voice that was quiet yet angry to the point that it could be thought of as a special skill. She was looking around with her blue eyes filled with suspicion, and it was as she said. This was not the time for gossip, since currently, Rem and Katia were in the middle of evacuating together with a group of dozens of people. In a turn of events after the fight between the rebel army and the Imperial Army, they were now right in the middle of aiming for the outside of the Imperial capital now that the situation had changed. At the mansion of Chancellor Burstet's Fondalfin, where they had been taken prisoner. Some time had now passed since someone came to their aid just in the nick of time when that place was attacked by a mysterious group of people. This aid was troublesome. The one who helped Rem and the one who helped Katia as well, both of them disturbed Rem's inner mind for extremely complicated reasons. One of them was the person who had been by Rem's side ever since she woke up without her memories, Natsuki Subaru. He appeared with a different look to him to get Rem, who was captive, and rescued her from peril. That fact, and also that he had shrunken down while he was out of sight, were things she had reservations about, but still, that would seem insignificant when compared to the complicated situation she had with the other one. Todd. Moving her lips so, with an anxious expression on her face, Katia's pale skin turned a shade paler. Holding tightly onto the railing of the wheelchair, she tried to hide her shaking. As if she were relying on it during this unstable situation, she mouthed that name, seemingly unaware of the fact. But to Rem, that name was, the person with that name was quite important. Todd Fang. As with Katia, Rem mouthed that same name, as if trying to make sure nobody heard it. It wasn't a name she would say she relied upon, or even one she held much goodwill for. That would be the case, since, to Rem, Todd was someone who was tied to some very dangerous memories. From the point of view of Rem without memories, Todd was the first one to have threatened her life. If she closed her eyes to various conditions, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to call him that. Of course, the person in question said that it was on the army's orders, and he was not doing it of his own will, but you worry too much. You're getting some unnecessary ideas like, if you bring up Todd in this situation and make me talk about him, that would help me relax, right? Why you're so obvious? Without turning to meet eyes with Rem, who was pushing her wheelchair, Katia told her understanding of the intentions behind the question she had given earlier. At that understanding, which was very like Katia, Rem closed her eyes. However, the way Katia took it and the way Rem thought about it were practically completely opposite. The reason Rem asked Katia about Todd was because she expected to find a way she could get an excuse to separate them directly from Katia's mouth. If she could get Katia to become suspicious of Todd's words and actions, and get her to feel more like Rem and the others do about him, then she could get Katia to separate from that dangerous person. No matter how much, that's right, no matter how much she tried to paint him as a good guy, Rem did not feel like giving the human known as Todd even an inch of trust. And as Subaru found him convenient, he must be quite exceptionally skilled. She understands that, and even then trusting him is difficult, since Todd never once tried to learn the names of the people around him. And when Rem had begun to consolidate her complicated state of mind. Katia, stop like a sucker punch, she heard the voice of the man himself, and Rem's shoulders jolted reflexively. In Rem's stead, Katia's voice unconsciously called on the owner of that voice. Todd, that man, from which not a smile rose up at Katia's relief. Todd shrugged his shoulders. Everything's been going fine until now, but a bit ahead there was a bit of a nuisance. There's enough zombies to make me reconsider changing our route, but unfortunately, there's no time to search for a different route. Todd pointed at the road with an axe in hand, and the one to draw the conclusion of his explanation was a young figure holding hands with a girl in a dress, Subaru. Rem and Katia, as well as the about 20 boys with black hair and eyes that were imprisoned in the mansion. Due to the fact they're taking those burdens with them on their escape, Subaru's group went ahead to secure an escape route, with the whole group aiming to get to the castle walls and get to the outside of the imperial capital. However, this meant a shadow has finally fallen upon their so far successful. So, there's a strong enemy, and we have no time to find a different path. We're completely cornered. What do we do? Let's see, how about giving up and joining the dead? Doing that with you might not be so bad. Stupid. If you're gonna die, go die by yourself. Ah. Having unintentionally spat that out, the color swiftly drained from Katia's face. She heard the urgency of the situation, and she bit back at those biting words with her statement. But immediately fiercely regretting the words she said in the moment was Katia's bad habit. Of course, understanding that, Rem tried to rebuke that statement and, "Don't make that face. You didn't really mean that, I at least know that much." But before anything could come out of Rem's mouth, Todd said that gently while stroking Katia's frizzy hair. Todd's speech and mannerisms, and what's more, Katia's relieved face struck Rem in the chest. The confidence Rem had as someone who had become Katia's friend, her feelings as she pretended to be someone who understood her, were overturned. Having lost on that point, Rem's heart became greatly upset. "I talked with these kids as well. We don't have the leeway to change our path right now. Which is why, with everyone that can be counted as a fighter, we'll wipe out the enemy. In the meantime, you try to get to the castle wall from the neighboring street. We've made a plan for victory, so the detached team is a just-in-case kinda thing." Leaving Rem's inner thoughts aside, Todd and Subaru explained the course of action for now. Apparently, they seem to be saying that while Subaru and the others face off against the enemy awaiting them, Rem's group should circumvent the battlefield. "Please wait. If you mean anyone that could be counted as a fighter, then I as well." "A fighter? You, girl? Any complaints?" Naturally, Todd made a perplexed face towards Rem, who had protested her exclusion from the people who could fight. With what had occurred before, Rem's voice went lower, and she glared at Todd, but he shrugged his shoulders with a nah and, "Your gait, it has an odd quirk to it because you have a limp leg, right, girl? If I recall, last time I saw you, you were using a cane. You're not aware how well you can move, are you?" "That's... We can't call someone who doesn't have a complete grasp of their own mobility a fighter. Besides," without replying to any of Todd's harsh remarks, Rem grinded her molars from the frustration. Todd acted pompously on his last words he gave towards Rem and turned his gaze towards Katia. Seeing Katia muttering what at the gaze of her fiancé, Todd laughed. "It looks like Katia trusts you. Pretty rare for someone as shy as her." "Wah, that's why I want to leave Katia in your hands. How about it?" Side-eyeing Katia, whose face went bright red with teary eyes, Todd threw a question at Rem. Rem noticed her own complete defeat with that cowardly question. At being counted out of the fighters, and Katia's new human behavior, she had been completely trapped. At the very least, if Rem's own counterattack would not come to pass, then trying to turn her gaze to Subaru. "I agree with Todd. Rem, take care of Katia-san. Let's all meet safely outside the walls." "Understood." Hearing those words from Subaru, the one who had the probability of backing her up, Rem powerlessly nodded. This was something she had already understood. To Subaru, it was hard to agree to having Rem jump into danger. Just as Todd kept Katia away from danger, he as well kept Rem from danger. And as one would expect, he had properly prepared an excuse that would be hard for Rem to decline. Then, "Katia, mind your manners. I'll definitely come get you later. Don't make a mistake. Your strong point is being witty and tenacious, so make sure to properly make use of that strong point of yours. I know. I also treasure you above anything else." With that exchange of words between Todd and Katia, Rem saw them off with an indescribable feeling, while also hesitating on whether she should also give similar words to Subaru, too. However, the irony of fate would bear its fangs not towards Rem, but towards Katia. At Katia being frozen stiff, with her blue eyes stuck open, Rem bit her lip and hung her head. Rem's hands tightly held onto the hem of her own clothes, and her chest was filled with a feeling of uselessness. This was a role she took on herself. In which case could I have done better? She wondered. The delivery of this information from Rem's mouth to Katia of this terrible news. Because of that, Katia's eyes swam, and after that she once more asked Rem. "Wah ti did you just say, Rem?" "Todd-san he could not be found." "Liar." With her head still hung and without looking at Katia's face, Rem repeated the same information and was torn apart by a sorrowful voice. The wheels made a rattling sound as they turned, and Katia, who moved forward, grasped Rem's hand. Katia's nails dug in unconsciously, but pain like that was trivial when compared to the pain Rem and also Katia were feeling in their hearts. In order to face off against the strong enemy that stood in their way, Subaru's group separated from Rem's. Thanks to that plan, Katia and the captive children safely escaped to the outside of the imperial capital. After they separated from them midway, however, Subaru's group had pushed itself to death in the exhausting fight against the strong enemy, especially Subaru, who, when Rem reached him, was on the brink of death. She had just barely made it in time and managed to save Subaru, but she gripped Rem's hands painfully, and Katia's already pale and sickly skin drained even more blood. The figure of him, Katia's fiancé, who was fighting together with Subaru against a strong enemy, was nowhere to be seen. Beatrice and the others as well had separated from Subaru and him in the middle of the battle, and could not reunite their battle, concluded with that strong enemy. Therefore, they didn't know how Subaru and Todd's battle reached its conclusion. There's still that kid that came to get you, right? That person, yes. If he was with Todd, then we still can't know for sure. Maybe, just maybe he knows what happened to Todd, what happened to him. Katia-san. Why? The trembling Katia's eyes gazed at Rem, and the pained emotions behind those blue eyes wavered for a moment. Most likely, the words she had cut off were meant to be blame thrown at Rem. Whether that be blaming her for not bringing back Todd, or perhaps for only bringing back Subaru. It was Katia's own conscience that made her not say it. While feeling that she would rather let her shout at her, Rem was also at a loss for words. No matter how earnestly he showed his cooperativeness, Rem's suspicion towards Todd never cleared. The relief Rem felt now that Todd was gone was not insignificant. While that was not something she was able to say to Katia, it was undoubtedly the truth. It's not true. He couldn't, Todd, not like that. Katia, who remained unable to accept the reality told to her, said so weakly. She would have liked to have a heart-to-heart with her and give her time to calm down, but they didn't have that privilege here. The walls of the reservoir had been broken, and the imperial capital was sinking under a great quantity of water. The evacuated imperial citizens, soldiers, and rebels had begun to move towards a northern city, and Rem and her could not delay further. At the very least, Rem's healing magic should be put to good use, but it was hard to leave Katia's side. And when Rem was wavering like that, Katia, hey Katia, if it ain't Katia. Around them were many refugees, pieces of cloth spread on the ground, and a tent erected to make a rudimentary break room. A voice with seemingly no consideration or care to it, Rem was surprised when it called Katia's name, but the person in question's reaction was much more dramatic. As if pulled back to life, Katia raised her face, turned towards the voice, opened her eyes, and then said, "Be brother." "Ooh, there you are, Katia. Thank goodness, you managed to get out of there, huh? I was about to go dive back in myself, but there were so many people getting in my way that I was having a hard time, pushing the crowd aside." This imperial soldier with an eye patch walked up to Rem and Katia. For a moment, she felt like she remembered him from somewhere, but Katia's reaction overshadowed Rem's thoughts. "Is that your brother? But I heard Katia-san's brother was supposed to be dead." Who th fucks dead? Wait, are you her caretaker? Good job bringing Katia here, and I am definitely getting some payback from you for. Todd is. His face, with a roughness like that of a bandit, turned to a scowl, and the man Katia called brother began meaninglessly threatening Rem. However, he was stopped by a few words from Katia. Her brother turning wordlessly towards her, Katia released her grip on Rem's hand and instead took the hand of her approaching brother. "Brother Todd, he's hick." That motherfucker. Suddenly she exploded in emotion, and Katia clung onto her brother's hand with her voice trembling. Big blobs of tears dropped from her eyes, and her brother clicked his tongue, pulling the head of his sister close to his chest. His body was that of a man covered in blood, dripping in sweat and mud, but Katia didn't pull away. She couldn't pull away. Rem could not do that. Katia's emotions burst out and her weeping began spilling out. Even with her brother, who was thought dead, back, she still couldn't think that it was fine that Todd's well-being remained unclear. Katia simply broke into tears without restraint in front of Rem, who was at a loss for words. Hearing her suffering, anxious, crying voice, Rem felt a prick in her chest, and for some reason felt heat from the back of her eyelids. "Why me?" Tears welled up, yet Rem questioned whether she herself had any reason to cry. She made Katia cry. It was her fault. That feeling of powerlessness continued to torture Rem very, very strongly. The powerlessness of not being able to at least let her cry within her arms also continued to torture her. Todd Tuwad Hick. Having lost a precious someone, sincerely grieving, the loving girl suffered greatly. She prayed in her chest that, at the very least, her fateful reunion with her brother gave some salvation to Katia's heart. Soon after this will it arrive for Rem, a verily unavoidable fated reunion of her own. The time for the great desire of those who came to get her from a country far, far away was before our eyes, and the readiness to come to terms with it was something Rem still had not prepared within herself. End.